Sorry, so we're going to be recording the meeting. All right. So thank you everyone for joining in. It's been an exciting week for all of us to plan this, and especially with the interesting Urwerk team. First of all, thank you the Sabus and also and Ethos for kind of connecting us with Urwerk and helping us set this up. Sparsh Arun from Ethos specifically has been really helpful with this entire management, and it was actually their idea also that we should do this event with Urwerk because it's very interesting. And then we picked it up, and then we did a little bit of research on it, and it's amazing. So glad to be here. Welcome everyone to another episode of Risk Talks with Red Bar. Earlier Bombay Watch enthusiasts. A lot of people out here know us by that name too. We're a small and a budding community out of Bombay, and a lot of members are from all over the world because now we are Red Bar. We are the first and the only chapter of Red Bar in in India. And for the guys who are new to Red Bar is the largest watch community in the world globally. And we have around 70 plus chapters and 10,000 and counting enthusiasts together, forming this huge network of very interesting watch geeks. So today we have with us Urwerk, Felix and Martin, and Ahan from our team is going to be taking the session through, and we all are eagerly waiting. Ahan, if you can take over.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Martin. Hi, Felix.
Hello.
I hope I can address you by your first names.
Absolutely.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you. So a very, very warm welcome to our humble community here of passionate watch geeks at Red Bar Bombay. It is a pleasure to host you at our event, and a great honor for me personally to be able to host, to be the host today. I also wanted to let you in on a little fun fact. While I was preparing for this event and researching about you and your brand, it dawned upon me that I am exactly as old as your company itself. And that makes this event all the more special to me.
Very good. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right. So, Puneet, if we are ready to start, I think we can just go ahead with it.
For sure, for sure.
All right. So I thought that it would be very good for the audience to, before we delve into your brand and your collection, which of course we're going to do, I thought it would be very good for everyone to know how the co-founders met each other and how they talked about this idea of such a radical brand and such a shift in the 1990s.
Well, it goes really, of course, quite a long time back, as you know, and it was due to circumstance and due to the fact that I went to art school together with Felix's cousin. That was actually the link from me to the Baumgartners. I went to art school in Lucerne, a beautiful city in Switzerland in midst of mountains there. And I, started doing concept art and video art at the time together with the cousin of Felix. His name is Christoph Draeger. And we had an artist group called United Swiss Artists at the time, USA. And we did some art projects, just starting actually with it. And that's the time when I got to know Felix and Thomas, Felix's brother at the time. We were starting, the three of us with it, but it started with ideas, actually first getting to know each other at the party as usual.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I can say from my side is that, I have, in my education, I have two sides. I have on one side, my father restores still today clocks, old clocks, English clocks, French clocks, and he was quite lucky to have important collectors here in Switzerland, which are still able to collect Abraham Louis Breguet, Antite Janviers, Ferdinand Berthoud, you have Thomas Tompion, Joseph Knipp, you have quite all these gods of clockmaking, and I grew up around all these gods of clockmaking. And while my father was restoring these clocks, which he sold eventually to our clients. So that was one side, one lucky side of my clockmaking history, and the other side is my mother. My mother, she is very open to architecture, to modern art, to also modern music, Rolling Stones, or even Prince, for example. You know, like very contemporary music at the time. And so I had a pool out of these two. This was my kind of education, and for sure, my mother also talked about, a lot of my cousin Christoph Dräger, which went to school with Martin Frey in this contemporary art school in Luzern, and and with my brother and with this connection, we came to talk about art, to talk about watches. What are watches today? You have in Lucerne, you have this crazy Bucherer retailer everywhere selling Rolex and Patek Philippe. And you have kind of, you know, in all the important streets in Switzerland, you have Rolex and Patek and Audemars and, you know, all these big brands. But you know, I grew up with old clocks, with the old masters, with the old gods. So this is something we started to question with Martin and Christoph and Thomas, and this was the start of our meetings.
That is honestly amazing. I mean, we meet a lot of people in our day-to-day lives, and a lot of people we must share passions with. But to connect on such a deeper level and actually build a whole company, it's truly amazing. So this actually brings me to another question, because you mentioned that in those times brands were mostly mainstream like Rolex, Patek, etc. So during those times, to bring a watch like you produced in 1997, it must have brought about a lot of personal as well as professional challenges. So, as well as in addition to that, maybe a fear of acceptance must have also been there. So, if you could talk about how that experience was to introduce such a radical concept in that time, that would be great.
So,
And
okay, yes, okay. Second question.
no, sorry, I was just about to say that my questions may be very common for both of you, so any of you could take it up. It's not directed to anyone in particular.
Okay, fine. You know, I have to de-dramatize a little bit, you know, because we haven't started as a vision to build up a company. We haven't started with the vision to express ourselves in what we love, in what we like and what we like to do. And actually, when we started in the very beginning, it was about creating some prototypes, some watches, trying and just express ourselves. So for sure that when we first finished the first prototypes in 96, 97, when we presented it in the Basel World, but I went actually to Sven Andersen, and Sven Andersen invited me somehow to exhibit these prototypes, because Sven Andersen is one of the founders of the Academy, of the AHCI group. So I worked at his office at the time. So he saw our prototypes, which we finished with Thomas, with Martin, and he was very intrigued, and he even helped actually also in some details. And he said, "Well, okay, guys, come and exhibit this, you know." And we were for sure pleased, and we went to Basel, and it was quite a success for us, because for sure some people hated it, and some other people were like, "Wow, that's incredible," you know. So that's the start.
It really started a bit like an art project, one can say. I mean, I was just in the mood of concept art and all this, and when we started talking about time, basically it started like with these philosophical terms more, to find this common ground. We were just talking about this together, and so we just began with it, you know, like, and at some point we were like talking about different things as well, and then I remember that. That you know, we were just saying, okay, you know, like one creates stuff. I had a measurement tool that I that I wanted to make, to measure distances in a face, to make portraits with based on numbers. So you have a distance from here to here. So I had this tool that measures distance on a map. And so I had some drawings laying around there, and that was seen by the watchmakers. And they told me, yeah, but you can't do it like this. It's just not possible. You have to do it. We know how to do it, the tool like this. And so they actually made this tool, and I realized what they can do, what incredible craftsmen they are. And so we at some point started to talk, we could do other things as well. Why don't we make a watch at some point? They came with an idea but it took maybe a year even or so, until they came with this idea that they had seen in their father's, workshop, this table clock, going back in watchmaking history, many centuries, back to the Campanus brothers, that featured this wandering hour indication, and it's a very different way to indicate time, and I found it fascinating. And so we started with this different time indication that somehow offers a lot of, opens a lot of questions. If you indicate time differently, you also get a different answer about what time is. So for us, this was a super starting point to begin our adventure here with a different way of indicating time that allowed us to change many things actually concerning the case and so on.
No, you're right actually, because when you do see, generally our perception of time is, in a circular format where you go from 12, 1, 2, all the way to 11 and then 12 again. So yeah, when you see time differently, you also start to perceive time differently. You're very right about that. So when you talk about your inspiration, sorry, you were saying?
No, I just wanted to say that was a fundamental situation or point actually that we started with this different time indication, because that opened up the whole spectrum of what is time and how can we indicate it, how can we do things differently basically. And so we were on our own experiment that was not that much in connection to what was happening at the time in the world of watchmaking. It was really like our own art project that we begin like our very own path, so.
Absolutely, Ahan. What is one basic thing you have to understand is that we are not businessmen or entrepreneurs. We never made a school for that. We are not from marketing or whatever. So I'm basically a learned watchmaker. And Martin is a learned contemporary artist. This is what he learned. This is what he went to school for. And I went to school for watchmaking. And this is somehow, and the rest, the life is our school, and we are very curious. We are very curious every day. And we are now in a lucky position where we can bring all our ideas into our work and express that in our work. But in the very beginning, it wasn't actually, it was like a dream, but it wasn't, it was quite easy. It was easy going, it was like having parties, having a good time, being young as you today, Ahan, we were quite having fun,
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Actually, Ahan, we're still having fun. We are still.
that's the art.
That is the best way to live life. That is the best. So when you talk about all these inspirations that you gather, and I know that you actually are inspired by everything around you, but you mentioned the 16th century old clock that had those wandering hours, which also inspired your work. So much like that, do you have any other anecdote of how something from the past has inspired your current or future collections?
You can say that you can travel to different paths. Of course, you can say that a science fiction film that one has seen, that probably we all have seen at some point, Star Wars, for us now lies in the past. It was 1977 when I have seen the film for the first time. but it was not only Star Wars. It was kind of like a series of science fiction films that came from me one after the other, and that somehow opened up an idea or somehow a vision of the future, where machines talk with each other. You know, you have like C-3PO and R2-D2, but you have also dystopic films. You know, and of course also other films. Film in general is a medium that lets you travel in time, and we were, of course, next to other inspirations, we were drawn to films, and so of course there you have something that brings you now already in the past, but brings you to the future, to an imagined future. So it can be popular culture, or better to say, it can be what surrounds you. That's what makes it the contemporary thing to do. It's like what one does in art, obviously. You look around, you see the world the way it is, and it's also our unique chance as human beings that we are in our own time, and that's our own thing that nobody else. I mean, of course, the people who share the time with us, they also experience it slightly different. Everybody from his own standpoint. But like in other centuries, and that these are the centuries that we are also looking back to to look for inspirations, of course. But they had a very different situation, had very different circumstances, and so we have to do our own thing. You know, everybody in its time, and therefore you take as much inspiration in as you can from what surrounds you, and you try to then express this in what you're creating. If it's art, if it's architecture, if it's watchmaking, if it's film making, whatever it is, you know, you try to do to take in as much from what surrounds you at the very moment, and to do a contemporary expression of how you see the world, right? And that's exactly what we started to do with our watchmaking.
One not so glamorous anecdote would be that, you know, on our 103, the fine tuning, we you know, the 103 is probably our milestone, groundbreaking breakthrough somehow in our work. You know, this is when we started really to have to gain some respect and regard to what we are doing. And actually, when you turn the 103 and you see the backside of the 103, you have the control board. And on that control board, you have the indications, the seconds, the minutes, the power reserve. And you have a little screw, a fine-tuning screw, where we can regulate actually yourself, the basic movement. So you can become somehow your own watchmaker. You can have somehow a direct relation with your watch, and this is something we quite appreciated. And when, you know, we say often, and actually the official note is that Abraham Louis Breguet started doing this in his pocket watches. This is what exactly you can see in the history books, but in reality, I've seen it actually on very cheap Svisa alarm clocks. You know, I had as a child, I loved all the clocks I could have. I loved them, and I found once a very cheap alarm clock, and on that very cheap alarm clock, you were able to regulate yourself, the precision of this mechanical movement in this alarm clock. And this is somehow probably when I played around as a small kid doing this further and you know, every day. Probably this is something which came back somehow in the 103, you know, but this is not an official statement, you know.
I hear that for the first time, but it's a super story. Of course, it always is what somehow interests you, or what starts to occupy your mind, you know, as a child. Usually you can reach back to what fascinates you as a child, and you keep this interest or this curiosity in what the world is, you know, alive. So you every child needs to somehow take the world in, right? So it's just the basic job to somehow get an idea of what this whole thing means. And,
Exactly.
and so you're quite busy for a while, you know, to do that. And then sometimes with some people it can, when they somehow have enough information for the time being, they they have to get serious, so to say, and then maybe they stop a bit with their curiosity because it's something that kids are allowed to do. But if you're able to somehow create a job for yourself where you can keep this curiosity about things alive, then that's actually for me a really perfect work.
And Martin, usually you don't get as a kid from your father Abraham Louis Brugge pocket watch to play around,
Well, like people like you, obviously they did. You have all sorts of machines there around. But I have to say, for me, it's a bit similar too, because my father, he was working in basic research as an engineer, and he was working in this institute where they had like a cyclotron where they were speeding up protons. And so they would always, my father, they had like a day, like an open door day or so, where one could go there to see, the machines and so on. And it was always a bit scary. But I also have seen these experiments built up, so that the world of technology is something that I find fascinating and also beautiful on top of it. So I was not the mathematician in the field there, but I was fascinated by the aesthetics of these kind of experiments and machines. And I think it's fascinating, and maybe there, the Star Wars films and things like that were also inspiring. We are at the moment in a situation where more and more machines become a part of our lives. Of course, that started from the very beginning on. We started to use tools, and but now the tools became extremely sophisticated, and we created devices that somehow organize our lives, and that become some. You can say with the cell phone, it can even become with smartphones. It can become a part of our brains. So we start to we really have to think about that relationship between man and machine. And in this field of watchmaking, this of course is a very important and a very fascinating theme. So we have somehow built up, next to creating the watches, we have built up a couple of these themes that we are following. Felix just said the interactivity, this interface between man and machine. That's like something that we are interested, where we are interested in this that somehow a confrontation. So there's a couple of themes like this that we are somehow busy following, and we do our research in it.
Yeah, I think you have definitely excelled at creating that collaboration between man and machine, because a lot of your complications actually reflect that. And like Felix just said, even the fine-tuning mechanism, it just makes you more interact with your watch a lot more. So it truly does affect that a lot. Coming to the fact that you're an independent brand and what it means to be independent, we ask this to a lot of our guests who are from independent brands. So I just want to ask the two of you, what does it mean for you to be independent, and what are some of the freedoms and some of the challenges that come with independent watchmaking?
Felix, do you want to take this on?
Yes, sure. So I think I somehow already answered a bit this question when I told you that we are, we started all this with having fun, but also with expressing a real feeling we had, and we still have today. And it's really for us freedom to be ourselves, to express ourselves. And for sure, when you are a very big corporate brand, at a certain moment you have other responsibilities. So this is why, and this is quite an important little message. And actually, it came up naturally again. It's not something we planned. Is that we are, since 15 years, we are producing 150 watches per year. So we keep our stuff very stable. We have a kind of two families, one in Zurich, one in Geneva, and a quite really stable family. And this is a field we feel comfortable to not to grow in volume and in turnover, but to grow in our expression in watchmaking. And this is all about Urwerk and all about independent watchmaking.
Yeah, you realize that when you somehow created the kind of like equilibrium situation, where you see that the watches that you create, you can only do them in that complexity and with that kind of care for it, if you create a certain amount of watches only. So you find a possibility of how it's possible to do it, and then the idea is to see if it's possible to somehow stay right there in order to continue to produce the same kind of complex avant-garde watches. If you change something, if you make more watches, because you think you have to just make more because you would gain more money, then you start to change something also in the way these watches have to be made. So you can't do too much of adjustment there without creating a change also in the way the watch in the end will be. So you kind of like find the perfect equilibrium of how to do it. And of course you have to change that because the world doesn't always stay the same. But with the idea, as Felix already said that, to somehow stay stable. And this is like, this gives you a lot of freedom in this sense for expression. And if that's your goal, that's why it's good to be independent.
That is absolutely true, and it's actually quite beautiful that you're able to, express yourself in such overt ways, and you don't need to be subtle about it in any way whatsoever. So it's really very nice for the watch community to be able to experience that as well. Felix, you mentioned that you produce about 150 watches per year. So, considering that, what happens to, like, with respect to your previous models? Generally, I have seen that you keep releasing newer models every year. And to be honest, that is also going to be another question because I don't know how you do that. But considering that you keep doing newer releases, what happens to your past models? Do you discontinue them, or do you just slow down their production slowly?
So, what we love most to do in Urwerk is researching, going further, questioning, and this is why out of the 15 people, we are probably 4, 5, 6, like 3 engineers, Martin and me creative, and then a watchmaker. So we are like 5 really creative people researching into new directions. So 1/3 of the power of the company goes in research. So this is somehow also the reason why, yeah, we are able to bring out almost, not every year, but almost every year a new creation. And this is what we absolutely love to do. So then for sure, as you say, an older model has to die, but actually is limited, becomes limited through that. So I think it's a very true relation to a watch, which for us, a watch is like a one part in a puzzle. And it's a one part in a puzzle, and then it stays in the puzzle, and the picture continues with new creations. And it's not dying, it stands there. It's very important. Actually, it's a pillar out of our history, our creations. So like a pillar in our foundation. It's a foundation and it's a puzzle, and we go on constructing that image. And usually when we start a new model, we give a limited production of movements. So we say, okay, now, for example, the 220, there is a limited production of movements of 110 movements in total. And then we split them up into different versions. Let's say there is a black titanium, so then we split them up into 3, 4 versions. And at the end, it's finished. And then we are coming up with a new watch. So that gives us freedom and a place for our team and our time to focus onto new models or the existing model. So I think, and on the other side, to collectors, it ensures that it becomes it's an exclusive production, which is limited. So I think, yeah, yes, sure.
I just want to say from the development of the watch or of the product, so to say, it's also interesting if you create something at the beginning when you don't know it yet very well, it's just born. You know, it's kind of like a phase where things are archaic. You know, they're just new. You don't know them. You have to get to know them. So you develop them, and you can find that in all the art styles, you'd say, or all the art epochs, that you first have when an idea was new, it develops, and at the beginning it's raw, it's kind of like new, and it's maybe more primitive, or it's more edgy, it's more prototypish, so to say. Then you go into a phase where you start to learn to know the product better, you know how to do it, you start to find out how it has to be done, you test the different colors, different maybe changes, you optimize technology a bit, and then you go into a third phase, you know, one could call it a decadent phase, which is not necessarily a negative term. You can imagine in Greek art, you know, the Corinthian, you know, columns, you know, where there were a lot of, you know, crazy flowers on top and a very complex thing. At the beginning was very basic and just a pillar tack, what's necessary. And at the end, it becomes like an over-the-top thing, right? So you can go through all these phases, but then at some point you had this cycle and you experienced it and you know it. And it's also maybe a good moment to stop it instead of somehow keeping it alive, you know, forever changing little things. And so if you're a bigger brand, maybe you created an iconic thing, you're forced to somehow stay on it. You know, you have to just, because it's too dangerous to change something. And if you're smaller, you can much more allow yourself to have something go away, fade away. And you have then, that's an expression of that time you did it, and you create something new, and you can then somehow focus on the themes that you're busy with exploring and just do a reinterpretation of it, but at a new time. So you're more, you know, in the moment in this sense as well with your creation. So also on the creation side, it is actually good to have this kind of cycles.
It's very refreshing to see your perception of time actually playing out in your conversations as well, because like you mentioned, Martin, you know how you go through a certain cycle, and then once you've gone through it, you learn from it, and then the next time is just a little bit easier. And like Felix mentioned when he was talking about discontinuing and the collection dying out, he said that, you know, essentially it is still stored away in its own time frame. So it's a very nice and refreshing thought process that both of you have towards how you perceive time, and I think that reflects onto your work as well. It's very just a sidebar, like very nice.
True.
So I also wanted to ask you about you know, moving on to a bit of your collection and your watches. You have very interesting and I don't know how to put it. It's very curious, your complications sometimes. So I wanted to ask you a mix of questions, which is, one is, how do you come up with them, and how do you actually execute them? For example, if I could just, you know, explain why I'm asking this. For example, in your UR100, which recently came out about 2 years back, you have added two 20-minute scales, right? So one is for the distance that you travel standing in the equator, which is about 555 kilometers. And then the other 20-minute scale is for the distance traveled around the sun. This is a very interesting and unique complication which just adds to the wandering hour design that you have already. And then add to that the split power reserve indicator that you added, you know, 24 hours here, 24 hours here. So what is the ideation like? What do you want these complications to represent for people, and how do you actually come up with them? I'm sorry, this was a bit too long, but I hope you understand what I'm saying.
No, I mean, this is exactly very important as we started, you know, with already with a different time indication. it's a theme for us, of course, to think about different indications. And you know, when you have a watch, we know that time, since Einstein, definitely we know that the time comes along with space. It's space-time. It's like one term, you know. So it's really, a watch should not only indicate time. In fact, it also, and it actually always does, but you can also point that out. Yeah, you can actually use the fact that our indication needs somehow the face only for a short moment here in front, and it doesn't need the whole circle to indicate time. So when you have these 3 hands that are needed to do that, and the 2 hands are somehow not in use. Correct. Because somehow they're hidden. So you can of course give them a new job. So we constantly think of you know, starting with our time indication at the very beginning, of new ways of using this somehow layout, you know, to indicate things. So we can, with every watch, we can maybe look at a certain aspect of that bigger, you know, structure that we are creating.
Yes, you know, Martin, what basically, this was our discussion like almost 30 years, 25, 27 years ago. What's about having a watch today on your wrist, you know? What's about this, you know? And I think it has to express values, it has to express ideas, and it has to propulse. It has to bring you into fantasy, into inspirations. And when you have a watch like the UR100, Han, you mentioned, that shows you while we are sitting here, but actually we are traveling like crazy, like rockets in the space, and not only in one direction, also in actually several directions.
Correct.
So you know, around the Earth, in the center of Earth, but also the center of the sun. Then the whole universe is again spinning on, you know. So there are actually like 5 or 6 or 7 movements out there. So, okay, we did not have the space on our 103 to show all the movements, but we said, okay, let's stick to what you can really see and feel and understand. And what you can see while you are on Earth is night and day. You have the effect of night and day. You see the sun, you see the moon. And these are the relations you can get very, very easily. And all of us, we have that. And our watch is somehow reminding us that in 20 minutes, we are spinning the kilometers or the distances you were telling us before, yeah, around in space. And that's just fabulous, you know, and watches should give you this dream and transport you, you know, and this is exactly work.
They are philosophical machines. We are measuring something. Of course, we need it to navigate in time, to meet, you know, at the right time with people and stuff. But because we have, you know, smart devices, you know, they took on part of the job, and the watch can maybe be a bit more again interested in different concepts and different ways to think about time. Being busy measuring such a strange thing, and when you indicate space, that's one possibility. But already with our indication, we have a particular thing, and that is that we are indicating 1 hour. You know, we are focusing on that 1 hour that we have. So we are much more forced to somehow focus on the moment. So you are much more in the present. And when you are having all the other numbers, you know, already indicated on the display. So you always, with a regular watch, you always think, oh, in 2 hours, I'm going to do that. And 3 hours, you know, ago, I was doing this. So for me, focusing on that 1 hour, Felix, what do you think?
We are talking to Red Bar India. And
yeah.
You know, like the Buddhists, you know, you live,
right? Absolutely.
You live in the moment. You live in the moment, you know. And
sure.
And Urwerk brings that focus, you know, in the moment, in the hour, you know. You live now, you know. And
It's
but I don't have to teach you that, Ahan,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
do I?
I completely agree. You don't have to. We really try to live in the moment. You're sure. You're absolutely right. I think what I take from both of your explanations here is one, the watch at the same time wants to not only ground you in that present moment, but also tell you that you are a small part of a much bigger universe out there. So at the same time, you're experiencing those two very complex emotions. It's very interesting to feel that. I think.
Absolutely.
Um,
And you can use a small machine like this that has a very somehow, somehow, usually it's just telling you, oh, I have to run, for the train or something like this. That's
yeah.
how it was used for a long time now. We are busy, and it can be annoying already because you see maybe with the digital indication, you see the running seconds and split seconds and so on. So it's just the idea of that we have not enough time that somehow is conveyed by it. But it's much more interesting to look at it in different ways. Also, our time indication does a thing where it's because it has goes just a part of that whole phase. It uses a smaller part, therefore has to be slower. That's yet another aspect of it. So you have you when you look at our watch, you don't even have a second mostly indicator.
Yes.
So you have a very steady, slow,
Yes.
not changing visual idea there, and that gives you also more time. I read that in a book of Umberto Eco. He blamed it actually on the watchmakers that that our times are hectic because they were speeding up, not time obviously, that's not possible, but they were speeding up the takt, the tick tock. So when you're imagining a clock in a grandmother's room, then you have that tick tock, very slow. The dust is in the air, you kind of fall asleep almost because it's kind of old, dusty. But then when you speed up that, of course you get totally hectic. But it's an illusion because time is just the way as fast as it is, And I find it interesting. I heard that about a culture that thinks that when you're actually when you're waiting, time stands still. So whenever you're waiting for a bus or so or wherever you are, time actually doesn't exist. So you can start to think about time, and you can use your watch, your wristwatch, to do it. So it gives you much more than just a hectic feeling. So we can explore many different things. That's just a few of the fields that are interesting. There's much more to it. We have also other themes that come in. That's maybe the theme of value. What does value mean? Is it connected to a material? How can we use materials? Different materials like precious materials. Can we somehow cover them to somehow point it out that these are precious materials and that we don't see the actual thing that makes it precious. So there's so many different levels on which we can somehow rethink that whole thing and stay curious about it. So that's our research and our experiment that we are busy with. And so the watch is a kind of a product of that thought process that we are engaged.
Very, very well put. Actually, one of the things that I noticed about your watches when I first stumbled upon them, and this was back, I think, in 2013 when your EMC had come out, I believe. That time also, this was like I was very interested. I was intrigued by the brand. I was like, wow, what a cool piece. And so I had to learn more about it. And this was the first thing I noticed that you guys didn't have a running seconds, or the whole face was very still. And then I started to learn about why you do that, and it was exactly what you just explained, and I was blown away because it was a very fresh perspective, and it's very, very good. Another thing that I want to ask you, and this is a very casual question, I thought of it suddenly because you were showing your watch. It's on a metal bracelet, and I also noticed that a lot of your pieces are either on a leather strap or on some sort of a different material strap, but very seldom they are on, rarely are they on a metal bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to ask, you know, your watches, I believe, will be the perfect, integrated sports steel bracelet watches that are currently the major hype in the market. I think yours would be a perfect contender for that. And yet you've never veered towards a metal bracelet. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there is. I mean, first of all, we of course did this, and we are among the high-end watch brands. We are probably, there's not that many who actually do this because it's super expensive. If you have a smaller editions to, limited production, in this sense, to create these metal bracelets, they're expensive to produce. But of course, it's something we did. I mean, we did it with this watch. This is quite a heavy watch, but we are absolutely
imagine, Ahan, we have the same company like Audemars Piguet, which is doing the bracelet for the Royal Oak since 35, 40 years now. So this is a very nice company here in Switzerland, and they do that bracelet very in a perfect quality and respect. And so the bracelet, Martin showed you the watch, we did 35 pieces, 35. So Audemars Piguet, they do every year, more than 5,000 bracelets. So, the whole development of the quality and the tooling and all the work, you can sometimes rentabilize. You can make it work financially when you are doing big series, but when you're doing only 35 bracelets, it becomes quite tricky to. So, but they approached us a few years ago, and they were quite fan of our watches and of our work, and they were like just offering the development of this bracelet. So we said, but I said this to Martin. He was very happy to hear it because he's pushing me since years and years. And I said, okay, let's wait, but it's difficult to find the possibility, And then finally, this company was very grateful, very open to invest in that, And actually, it's invest. It's not about the money, It's about doing it, and that's, you can see in the other companies, in the other independent watch companies which produce 150 watches per year, you rarely, or not even, you don't see a serious bracelet like that. And this is the reason of the cost of the development. So now there is the good news, we are now working in a new development for a new bracelet, which will come hopefully in the end of the year. So this is something we have now established somehow, this relation, and for sure we love to do that. It's great.
It's a very different thing if you have a depending on the material, it's if you have a metallic or a case that obviously is out of metal and it extends around your wrist. It's like the case that actually goes around your wrist. So formally and also aesthetically, it's a very different thing. What I like about it too is that it's when you wear it, it's first cold, and then you warm it up till it has your own temperature, so to say. So you have it's a whole different thing. It feels different on the wrist. But all different materials. Let's say a textile strap has its good sides, and so it's like these different materials that I mentioned before that you can play with. You can start to try out different things. Of course, if you have a rubber strap, you have less problems. Maybe going to take a shower with the watch. So you have so different materials. They give you different options. So this is interesting to explore.
This is actually one of the reasons why I like metal bracelets as well, because initially it's cold and so it's nice to the touch, and then you slowly warm it up to your room temperature. But thank you so much. I think because of you, Martin, we are getting to see Urwerk pieces in a metal bracelet as well. So thank you so much for bringing that into the brand.
With pleasure. No, I'm super happy that we are actually now, as Felix said it, that we are now exploring that even further. it was really for a while. It was I had to be happy with what we did. We did actually for the 200. The first 200 series we did already as a bracelet, and then we developed it into for the 210, and so it's established it is this possibility, and you always have to somehow you have to attack it, and then step by step, you maybe get there.
Martin, probably this is one of the positive effects of our 25 years soon anniversary of next year, that we are like somehow like the grandfathers of contemporary independent watchmaking, and are slowly becoming them. And so I can feel that the suppliers and the serious companies in Switzerland, they know us very well, and they are very happy actually to collaborate with us, because we are like carte de visite. We are like someone. They are quite proud of it, not in terms of the turnover, but in terms of the prestige. And so it's kind of we get something very interesting out of them, and they too. So it's but this is something 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't possible. It was just not interesting for them, And now that's one of the rare positive side of becoming slowly but surely a grandfather,
Oh, absolutely. That's why you have this kind of like evolutionary process going, where you build slowly and you take steps, you change things, and you somehow further explore it. And if you have, and that's really we can be happy and somehow proud on that as well, that we were able to create this kind of Urwerk world, so that we have more possibilities now. But you have to sometimes really dare to do these, even if at the moment it's maybe a small step, but you have to dare. I remember at the very beginning, Felix, when the first watches were, the first two models, were kind of like handmade, on the Schäuble machine and so on. And then it was a big step, what you said about the 103, to actually make it, to carve the case out of a block, using CNC machines. So it somehow forced us to approach the making, the creation of the case differently, and it's a bit also scary when you do this, because you don't know it yet, how to do it, and what it's going to bring. It can also be an investment and so on. But of course, that's the risks that it's great to take, and you have to do it carefully, but you have to steadily make the field bigger, and you should not have too many things to play with at the same time, though. That's something that my professor Roman Signer always said. He said, don't have too many tools to play with, so you don't get confused. So it's actually good to stay small in this sense, and to do these steps wisely, not too early and also not too late. So I'm glad with the metal strap. I'm totally happy with that.
I'm very happy that your company, your brand, your company has reached this kind of a stage. So congratulations to both of you. If this becomes such a well-respected brand, it's very good to hear. Because it makes you realize, it makes you feel that dreams can really come to fruition, and they can eventually be people can learn to respect and treat it with the like sometimes people say geniuses are never understood in their time. However, maybe that is not entirely true. Okay. Another thing that you mentioned was, how you guys are now going towards collaborations quite a bit. So I noticed that initially your first wandering hour indicator was on a collaborative watch with Harry Winston. Am I right?
We actually did two models before, but people normally don't know them because we were just not known at the time. Okay. But our first two watches already featured the same time indication, even though we used it slightly different. Actually, we used it in the exact way, the table clocks, the medieval table clocks were doing it.
Yeah.
That very inspiration with the semicircle, and actually we had like these two wheels with the even and the the odd numbers on 2 dials somehow underneath. So the first 2 watches were this, and only with the 103 we began to explore it further, and then we did the next step with our Harry Winston collaboration piece with the Opus 5. And so we did like the next step with the help of this opportunity. Absolutely.
So you have collaborated with Harry Winston. You've also collaborated with Debetune for an Only Watch. So I just wanted to know, how do you decide these collaborations? What is the process like? And are there any future collaborations in the works? Perhaps maybe, and also, okay, I will ask that later. But first, about collaborations and anything in the future.
So collaborations is something which is interesting when it's an exchange, when there is an exchange of values, of things which can bring something to the creation. For sure, with Harry Winston, it was also that light somehow, which brought some reconnaissance to us. It was like a tribune to stand up, and to say, okay, we are able to do this. So it was an interesting exchange, and we were honored at the time actually to be invited in that opus concept. And we also managed quite to deliver all the pieces. So it was, at the time, we were a very, very small company, even smaller than today. And it was a very fruitful, very good operation. Or actually, operation, it was also like about, expressing what we are able to do at the time. We brought actually the satellite indications into the 3rd dimension. The axis of the 103 have, the satellites are in the same axis than the carousel. And the carousel is 1 axis, and then you have 4 satellites around which have the same angle, the same direction. And with the Opus 5, we brought actually the axis of the satellite into the 90 degrees. So it became actually, to the carousel, it became very 3-dimensional. So perfectly 90 degrees. And then we came up with the 202, and the 202 had the 85 degrees. So it was kind of an evolution in our complication of this carousel. And we had another collaboration. Okay, you focus on collaboration. So we had Laurent Ferrier. Laurent Ferrier was for us very interesting, as he was a designer with Patek Philippe for quite traditional values, to mix them up with Urwerk and see what happens. And actually, Laurent Ferrier by himself, he loves sports cars, and Urwerk gave him somehow a freedom and a playground to express his emotion and his love for fast cars, and somehow he designed that case in that direction. So that was for us very interesting to see, in that he comes up with that. Debetune, it was kind of serious, like a sign of respect of both brands, to show each other we are working on different projects, but we give respect to the other brand. And I think that was quite similar also with the piece with Ambient F, and we did a very limited edition with them into the nitroglycerine project. That was another collaboration, you can say. So these collaboration, they come up from time to time when there's an interesting exchange, and also just the love and the emotion for doing it, So it's not something which is calculated in time, and actually, to be honest, at the moment we are we are not working directly on a collaboration like that. We have something going on, but which is on another level. So this is something with a research institute in Switzerland we are working. So it's not directly with a brand. It's with a research institute. We are working on a project. So yeah, we are open for that.
We also did not just collaborations, of like one watch brand with the other watch brand. We also had a cool project with Macallan where we did a crazy flask, for instance. So it's really, it can actually be whatever, something interesting. If if we see that it somehow intrigues us, and also the like the other side is interested in it, you find synergies there, and you can both profit from it and learn by it. I mean, with Macallan, obviously it was great because we were able to drink some whiskey and to visit them in Scotland and all this, So it always brings in, that field of from the other world, from maybe a world that you're a fan of. If it's also when we managed somehow to bring, and that's happened without even our doing, but when we bring in guys like, for instance, Downey Jr. wearing our watch, and it becomes like part of a film. The watch, all of a sudden, that's kind of like a collaboration as well, because the watch then turns up in a film. And we are just talking before about the fact that we're inspired by films. And so if now a watch finally again, becomes part of this world, this virtual world, it's like a circle closed. So we had of course Jackie Chan wearing our watches in his film, and so it was super cool to visit him. We met him at the time in Paris when he was shooting, and so I mean, this is great somehow to just like show respect to other parts of the world or so, and engage with other brands and so on, other products.
But for example, Ahan, for a little anecdote, it doesn't happen all the time. So actually we met Ralph Lauren a few years ago, and Ralph Lauren, he owns several watches of us. He likes Urwerk as a brand. And then we had a very good friend which organized a meeting between Ralph Lauren, his team, and us in New York. And we were thinking about the collaboration, what could be done together. And actually we walked out of that meeting, and it wasn't really fruitful, because we understood they have, I don't know, like 15 directors there sitting there. And each time when you talk about an idea, everybody's transforming it a little bit and asking other questions, and then it just goes away, and at the end it's killed, So this was, for example, a meeting we haven't walked out with a collaboration, even if it was an idea in the beginning, but finally it didn't happen.
I completely understand what you're talking about right now. I get it. But this is actually very interesting though. But I have a few more questions, but I have to stop and ask you. We have already reached the 1 hour mark, and we are a little bit past our time. We also give time to audience to ask questions directly to you. So because we will be doing that, and that will take about 10-15 minutes. Are you fine with the session extending a little while? Or should I stop and continue on with the question answers from the audience?
You can continue it. From my point of view, it's fine. Maybe
Yes.
my son will at some point appear, but up to now it's fine. So, but no problem.
And my Bengali cat also risks to jump into the screen. But Ahan, are we talking about an hour, an additional hour?
No. This would be perhaps another half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour more.
Yeah, just let's go on, and we are looking what happens, it's cool.
All
it's
right,
cool.
great. Thank you so much. So another question I had, and this is again a little bit of a silly question, but I hope you can answer it. So the first watch that you made was in a round case, and then post that, every watch that you have made has been in some different form of what do you call it? Shape. Sorry, I forgot. So a different form of shape that you have. So is there any plans for you to revert back to a round watch, or are you going to continue on this path of exploring newer and newer case designs? This is just a
Like,
general
it's a
question.
bit like dancing around, around the round case. Of course, it's with our time indication, and that's actually the basis for our kind of like geometry of the case.
Hmm.
When you look at the table clock, this table clock from medieval times, with the time indication, it just shows you that you can use this time indication differently. And we had it placed actually by the help of Felix's father, who had an important input. He at some point told us, you know what, because on the first watch, we had it exactly like on the table clock above, like somehow like a heavenly body, the satellite would like spin around you. But then with the 105, we would place the indication here on this side as we have it now, so that when you're sitting on your car, and you can actually look at the time just like that from the side. So you don't even have to turn the watch fully like this. You can just see it sitting there on the edge, the indication. So we really like that a lot. And yeah, so that's actually the origin of the somehow the different case shape. It has to somehow follow the laws. You have like the laws that tell you form follows function. And when you do then a linear time indication, you don't have in front a round shape, but you have like a straight shape. So the whole case somehow follows put.
The basic also point here is that, okay, how do you start in creating a new watch? And from our process, it's often first we have the technical idea. We have an idea about what should the movement or the indication express and how should it express. And then we start, like we call it, a ping pong between Martin and myself. And as when we know what is the function, what is the idea about the function, the indication, we start to think about the case form, which is form follows function, which has to react on that, as Martin is explaining to you. So for us, it's not so much, okay, now are we now planning to have another round watch? That's not the question. The question is, what do we want to do as a movement, as a mechanism, as an indication, as a complication? And then, and just after that, the idea comes, okay, what is the case form? It doesn't start with the case form. So that's the way how we go on. And there somehow everything can happen, so don't say never, never. So it's absolutely free.
I would say with the UR100, we are pretty close to a round watch already. I mean, you have, at least when you look at it from the top, you see that the glass is circular, exactly, and so you have still, and this is always, it's a game between angular shapes and circular shapes. I mean, there's not that much you have Cézanne, who came up with this idea of cubism. Basically, he was the father of cubism, even though Picasso and Braque came then afterwards to somehow create this ism. But it was Cézanne who somehow looked at nature, and when he painted it, he somehow reduced everything into round shapes and angular shapes, right? So he had like the houses, obviously, and then the trees and so on. So he had this abstraction of the image, and so you have these basic principles of shapes, and you find it in nature, you find it everywhere, of course, in different variations, and with you have to keep tension in a design, I think, to make it particular. If you have it, for instance, too symmetrical, it can become boring. You have in like, let's say you have the beauty dot, that was placed on a beautifully, painted face. You had you had a little
Monroe,
dot
the
somehow,
Monroe.
the Monroe dot, somehow to change the symmetry and add something particular. And so you have always these different forces, when you design something, you have to pay respect to this and play with these different with the set of tools there. And yeah, so the round watch is something that
Martin,
that we
half
keep
an
to
hour,
at the end.
half an hour, Martin.
Yeah, these are basic questions, and they were asked by our host. I'm trying to find the right answer there.
Okay, now I think we should move on towards my final part of my questions, and then we will move on to question and answers. This is more towards looking towards the future. Okay, so I had a few questions about your future. One was again very simple, because this was for all the women members in our community, especially at Red Bar Bombay here, and any other members who must be attending in the audience. You had a UR106 watch, which was specifically catered for women. So, is there any watch in the horizon which is also going to be catered specifically for women?
So that's basically on that question. I would say Urwerk is not doing watches for men or for women. We are just doing our watches. So, but you are right. In the very beginning, we did the 101 in 3 different diameters. It was 32, 36, and 40 millimeter of diameter. And actually, this is the fact, is that the very first client of Urwerk was a woman.
Wow.
So the very first client was a woman, and for a woman to have like a 40 millimeter diameter at the time, 25 years ago when we started doing it, and in gold, it was our first gold watch. So that was not possible. So we had to do it in 32 millimeters. But we haven't so much changed the design. It's just a little bit thinner, and so it's for me about it's our creations, and it's not so specially done for women. So, but you are right. The 106 is, we had a special thought on also doing with jewelry, with a sertissage on top, and to do actually. It was for me, for myself, not so much for women, but the goal of the 106 is to do a very elegant watch, to do a very elegant, very smooth watch, very comfortable on your wrist. And it turned out to be a woman's watch. So, but this is for me not so much the point. And probably the UR100 is also a very elegant watch, and it can be worn by both, let's say.
Yes.
So today we are not especially working on another woman's watch, but we are just working for both, let's say, for women and men, And
before we had women wearing the 103, and we also know that women sometimes they wear much heavier things on their wrists. They can wear, bracelets and stuff. So it's not for them. This is not even the point, but it's designed, of course, were created for us in the first place, meaning for men, and but not even thinking about this that much. If you were creating the watch, the 106, it was really different because when you do that for women, and that was really a bit. It was on the onset. It was at the idea of it. So it becomes a very different job actually to do this, because you have then to ask yourself, what would women like? And it's a very different task to create something as men, for women. So, but I find it fascinating. I would not mind to do that in the future, particularly for women, because of that different task it is. But if women like our watches the way we do them, just for us, so to say, they are absolutely more than welcome to wear it, for sure. They wear it very well. I've seen women wearing our manly watches, very well, for sure.
Very, very often, Martin, women wear our watches better than men,
Can be.
women mostly do stuff better than men anyway.
That's
So
right.
that's
There you go. There you go. That's true.
okay. Now, I think my second last question, and the last question will be again a very casual question. But my second question is, and now because you know how old I am and how, I mean, young I am, is in, I want this popped up in my mind when I was again researching about your brand. So I just wanted to ask, and this is again a very casual question. Is there any in the near horizon or even in the distant future, is there any possibility of a more affordable alternative Urwerk watch that is going to be upcoming?
So this is actually for sure a good question. And when we started in the very beginning, Urwerk, we really wanted to do actually affordable watches. But at a certain moment, we understood we are like artisans, artists. We are not businessmen, entrepreneurs, as we told in the very beginning. And we are so in that for that reason, we are very limited in production. And this is a way we chosen of and that means there has to be a certain cost per watch. And we made also an effort on that with our newest watch, the UR100, which is a little bit lower priced, let's say. So we can't, in our reality, this is probably the lowest price we can go. So we are not planning to open up a more affordable Urwerk. It's not in our book. And it's not what we, it's really in our reality, we have to stay how we are. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now my final question, and after that I will move on to my fellow Red Bar member Viranchi for Q&A. My final question is, what has your Indian market experience been like up till now? And also additionally, what do you both think about the Indian watch community and Indian watch collectors in general?
And one thing that I like to say before that, it was just before the COVID pandemic started, that we had our trip, just began our trip, and we went to Turkey, to Istanbul, and we had the plan to continue our trip to India. And I really regret it very much that we didn't end up coming to you then. But it was not possible, and still it seems to be difficult. But this is something that we really love to do because it's a super cool country, a really interesting culture, and not only to show you our watches and to somehow get to know you a bit better, but also just to look at the incredible cultural, and historical buildings, the world, it will be super, and we will love to do that.
The heritage of India is incredible. About you have a lot of sources and energies and buildings, as Martin says, and we will just as soon as possible and hope we also, with the help of Yashu Sabu, come over to India and to come closer to you guys and also to your culture. And I can, the Indian collectors I met are very curious, very open, very fresh-minded people, and it's the most of them. I had a really very natural, very good exchange of values, and I'm really open to look further to build that deeper coming into your country.
Ahan, if you allow me 1 minute, I want to explain my very interesting first interactions with Martin and Felix.
Of course, please go ahead.
So I first met Martin in Geneva, and it was a downpour like the Bombay monsoon. Okay, when I walked to their office, and I was completely drenched, and I got in, and I said, I was very keen on Urwerk, and I said, I present myself with completely wet, and I'm not sure what you thought of me, but I was this guy sort of cleaning my head and stuff like this when I walked in,
Wearing
And
something beautiful, no? I mean, no problem with that.
I don't know, Martin, but you didn't say yes, but you didn't say no, and that was a great point. And then a little time later, I had a meeting with Felix, and I couldn't believe this meeting because Felix is unlike any other luxury watch guy. I can tell you, this is like 180 degrees separate. Felix, you remember we met in this cafe at the Zurich railway station.
Absolutely.
And I walked in, and this was the place where you get beers for two Swiss francs, right? And I said, "My God, this is the guy who founded this fabulous brand." So that was an amazing, amazing experience. And thank you so much for trusting me, trusting Ethos, and allowing us to bring your fabulous brand to India. And we haven't had the chance of meeting too often, but watches, and the one thing which that I love other than watches is wine, and I'm sure we will have more occasions. But thank you very much for allowing this connect. It was a great first meeting, both with Martin and Felix. Thank you.
Wonderful story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Viranchi, if you're here now, then maybe we can move over to the Q&A.
Absolutely. Though I will say that it's been such an engaging session between Felix, Martin, and Ahan. We could go on, but we do have an audience that has been patiently waiting for some questions. So let's start with the first one. The first question is from Ankur Junjunwala. Ankur, if you want to go.
Hi, Martin and Felix. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
How are you, Martin? Unfortunately,
very good.
Online this time. My question is, as you said, the watches usually takes longer to show that 1 hour in Urwerk watches. Does frequency play a role in that, or the frequency of Urwerk watches are the standard 4 hertz?
Felix, you are entitled to answer this properly.
Yes, this is more like a watchmaker's question.
Okay.
So absolutely. So it doesn't really relate to that because we have in our most of our movement we have 28,800 hertz. This is 4 hertz. You can say it's quite a classical frequency. And then it's the gear, which brings it down to the frequency we have, which is for 120 degrees, we spend 1 hour, or we have here, for example, this is the UR 100. So you 1/3, 120 degrees. You have that's a gear actually, which is in charge to bring it from 28,800 to that 120 degrees. So that's a mathematic calculation. And so it's not really related.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
We have, when we are talking frequency, we have here the EMC. This is also a 4 hertz movement, but it's controlled with a mega quartz, which actually has a mega quartz, a mega very high frequency. So it's a mega quartz. It's much higher frequency than a usual quartz watch. So that's the comparison for the precision of this EMC. So there it becomes very technical, but for the indication, it's not directly related.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and our next question is from Emma Houghton of Gronefeld Watches, and she has been a guest on Wrist Talks before. So Emma, please go ahead.
Martin and Felix, I just love what you guys are doing. I asked myself the question, you have 15 people working over there, of which already 5 are on the creative side. So how much do you guys do in house? How much can you do in house?
It's a good, thank you for that question. So we have probably 18, 19 people, but very close to 15, you know. So we have the ability to do our own base plates. So we have CNC machines. We have also, even on top, we have the finishing machines, like doing the Côte de Genève also in-house. We are making the sablage and the diamontage in-house. So we are, for example, not doing the wheels. So we have not a turning machine, a CNC turning machine. So this is something we have a partner, very close partner since 22 years doing this. So we have a collection out of very good, you know, people. We are working in a good relation here in Switzerland, in the Jura. Most of them are in the Jura or in the Valais. So we are able to do our own constructions, to machine all the parts. We do also the dials, for example.
That's
So
cool.
all the parts you can machine, and we are machining them and finishing them. But then for sure, rubies we have to buy them. There are the straps, we have to buy them. So with 18 people, yeah, we had to focus on what we have, what is the priority somehow. And we are much in control of our quality, and also of the schedule, the date of deliveries. So that's another reason. You have to be in charge, you have to be in control of most of parts you are able. So
I already think that's quite a lot for, like you said, you're bringing out 150 pieces a year.
yes,
I think you're doing a lot in-house, and it's really cool.
yes, and actually, you know, we are since 25 years, that was always a very open speech, that we are using all the possibilities we have today to machine, but for sure combined with hand finishing and hand montage. And so it's really about the best machines and the best man work, human work together. And it's really, brings Urwerk alive.
One thing that I can say that I find interesting as well is all some of the co-workers, engineers and so, people working together with us, they are actually friends of Felix from watchmaking school, or like most of them. So it's like a group of friends, you know. I mean, they later on joined us, some a bit earlier, but it's like a group of friends, you know, working together.
So then I have one more question. In which watchmaking school were you, Felix?
Uhrmacherschule Solothurn, watchmaking school in Solothurn. Actually, it's the only Swiss-German watchmaking school in Switzerland.
I thought it was in Grenchen.
Okay, you are right. So it's moved. The Solothurn watchmaking school moved to Grenchen. Absolutely. And actually, two of our engineers, they are part-timely engaged as professors in the Grenchen watchmaking school now. So they work actually for us as engineers, and they are also professors in the watchmaking school in Grenchen. So we have very good relations to that school.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, and our next question is from my fellow Red Bar member, Adib Mehta. Adib, you want to come on board?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Viranji. Hi, Martin. Hi, Felix. Thank you for the session. Yeah, so Martin, you mentioned that science fiction movies have really influenced the designs of your watches, and that really clearly shows. I was wondering, are there any direct references in any of your pieces to any of those movies? Like,
I mean, when you look at our first watch, the UR102 as like a second watch, but we actually did these two first watches together. Both designs existed, and we produced them somehow at the same time. But the more iconic version is the 102, where you have like a asymmetric shape already. So that shape had an inspiration that like because of Star Wars and its spaceship Han Solo's spaceship Millennium Falcon. When you look at the shape of it, it has this kind of asymmetric shape. I learned a little bit later on. I learned that I found quite funny that when George Lucas, when they were like starting designing the Millennium Falcon, they were discussing about how that spaceship should look and stuff. And so they had like a cheeseburger sitting on the desk. And so they had the cheeseburger had kind of like a salad leaf sticking out, and so they actually they used that as an inspiration for the design of the Millennium Falcon. I didn't know that at the time I designed. I somehow had our first watch, somehow inspired by the super cool spaceship. But now that I know this little detail, I find it even more fun. But it's never like this that you look at that shape, and then you say, okay, I do it exactly like this. It can't be too somehow simple. Somehow the inspiration has to be somehow more subtle. So there's actually a lot of details or a lot of parts of the design that somehow are inspired by lots of different things. So it's like a whole amalgam of different things coming together. And so you have concepts like, for instance, talking about surfaces with the UR100, we did or also with the UR105, with the T-Rex, where we had geocharge, like a geocharge applied to the case, so that you can actually touch it. So there's also these themes coming from watchmaking history that you can somehow redefine and use. So the inspiration comes not like very clear, from one thing to the other. It has to always go through many different filters, and so it's more like aspects that come in. I like, for instance, of course, the robot C3PO, and so if you do a watch out of gold, I like it much more to look at that gold as a gold, like the gold of C3PO, than as a gold of I don't know, some other golden object. I prefer to look at it or connect it to a science fiction world or something like this. So it's more kind of like the leaning there. So that helps, drawing inspiration from science fiction films for the future.
Okay, that's so cool to know, and I totally understand. Thank you so much for answering that.
Welcome.
That indeed was really cool. The inspiration from a lettuce leaf. I mean, that's amazing. It really shows that you just have to be creative, and there's inspiration everywhere.
Yes.
I think we may have time for 2 more questions. I think there's a question from Pranav Iyer. Pranav, do you want to come on?
Yeah, sure. So first off, I'd like to thank everyone at Red Bar Bombay, Max, and everyone else, because this is my first get-together. So thank you all for making me feel welcome here. So I just have a short question. What to you was the most difficult reference over the past 25 years to put together, from a technical perspective at least?
So on a technical level, we made the 1001 pocket watch. We call it the Zeit device, actually. So that's a multitude of our creations we did, and on top there was an annual calendar in it. So this annual calendar was totally a new development. Which wasn't based on an existing annual calendar. It was totally focused on our satellite indication, where you have the satellites showing the months and then pointing with the hand to the date. So that's that's another. It was actually each time when we come up with a new indication, it's totally developed by us. So it's not just a modified tourbillon or a modified perpetual calendar. It's just always in our reality of our mostly existing satellite systems. But then we have also the other side, the chronometry side, the EMC. And lately, probably you have followed that up. We presented the AMC, and the AMC is a heavyweight, let's say, in the complication field.
Definitely.
It's really just something of most mind-blowing technical achievements, which was presented in the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years in watchmaking, because it's the first watch movement, totally 100% mechanical watch movement, which is able to adapt, to learn out of another source, a very precise source, which is the atomic clock, which is in the big clock. And then you have the watch inside, which is connected with two levers. And to be able to create that watch, we had to spend even more than 10 years. And
a long time.
It was really crazy, a new complication. It was even further because, as you probably know, Abraham Louis Breguet made the first sympathetic clocks. But when you look closer to these sympathetic clocks, the second was not adjusted to zero at the midnight, at the moment where the adjustment comes. So you have two adjustments. You have the time setting adjustment, and you have the regulation. The regulation means that the slave clock, so the one which has to be regulated, has to adapt to the other one. So it has to learn of the mother clock if it's going fast or slow. And to do that in a mechanical way, it's just crazy. To have two machines communicating together was really our biggest task. Probably we managed to do in the last 25 years soon, and I'm very proud of that. But it will not be the last heavyweight.
Sure, yeah, looking forward to it. Once again, Martin and Felix, thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot. Have a great evening, all of you.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you.
All right, this would be our final question, if anybody has one. Okay, well, maybe I'll ask a question. So what has been one of the or the most difficult material to work with, in the last, since you've started? I think you've worked with several different materials. So could you explain an experience of one of the difficult materials that you worked with, and how did you handle that?
Just recently we presented the Ur tantalum hull, Ur 105 tantalum hull. Tantal, we used it one more time before for a 110 model, and it is a very beautiful material. It is a pure element, and it's always nice to actually work with a pure element. It's a metal that just has this look, this color, and this qualities, given by nature, so to say. But nature obviously doesn't create these materials, for humans to use it. So it's quite refusing to be used in a way. That's at least what I hear from our engineers, from the guys working with our CNC machines, who have to then carve out the case out of this metal. And they tell me that it's kind of like eating the drill bits, So I'm actually really glad that we were able to produce like a second watch using this material. But of course, there's also other materials that are tricky. There are some materials that are perfectly suited, like brass or so, or arc up. There's some materials that are created as alloys, especially for perfect materials to machine. And then some other materials that maybe are beautiful, that are more difficult to handle. But we try to expand the palette there, as far as possible.
Oh, I can imagine. That is a pretty hard material to work with. So awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. And before I hand it over to our very able and talented host, Ahan, I would just like to say,
Thank you.
der Chat war wunderbar und die Uhren sind unglaublich.
Oh, wow, it's a perfect German.
Dankeschön, vielmals. So that's probably the limit of my German.
But it sounds, pronunciation is aber wunderbar, absolut einwandfrei, oder?
The Urwerk language.
Probably because I spent a few years in Basel. Okay.
All right, yeah.
So you can take a man out of Basel, but you can't take Basel out of a man. So I guess that's what it is.
Right, that's absolutely true.
But thank you so much, and Ahan, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Viranchi has pretty much said what I needed to say, which is thank you so much, Martin, Felix. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for being here. I had a blast talking to you. It was very fun hosting you guys for this event. And thank you so much to our audience for joining us and for staying with us for quite a long time. I mean, this was, I think, one of our longest wrist talks. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Viranchi. Thank you, Arpit, for the creatives. Thank you, Yasin. I'm really sorry you worked a lot for the PPT, but I could not find the time to put it on screen share. But thank you so much. And thank you once again, Martin, Felix. Thank you so much.
With
thank
pleasure,
you, everybody.
Absolutely. Next time we will see each other in person.
It was a big pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as Martin says, really the next time we have to do it in real.
Definitely. I cannot wait for that day. Thank you so much. And Felix, just before we go, the only reason I asked you about the affordable watch was because initially you mentioned the Rolling Stones, and I love their song "You Can't Always Get What You Want," but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. So I tried, and unfortunately, I can't get what I want. Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Bye. Bye.